Afternoons with Tim Webster, ABC Radio Sydney and New South Wales.
I know it's slightly macabre, but maybe not. I've been to, sadly, a couple of funerals in recent times to a couple of very good fellas that I've known for a very long time. And, of course, they're sad because the person has passed away. But you might have heard, becoming more popular is this issue of, end-of-life doulas are a thing, and Australia is leading the way. So what is that? Helen Callanan is an end-of-life doula and founder of Preparing the Way, and they offer the world's first government-accredited end-of-life doula course, and their first alumni, Kylie, has just graduated from the course. So you're thinking to yourself, well, this conversation that we have about death, is it something that we should have? Well, Helen Callanan is on the line with me now. G'day, Helen. As a general principle, I suppose in the past we didn't really talk about it very much, but we are, I'm gleaning, doing that a lot more, yes?
Yeah, 100%. I think there's so much more public awareness now. From Palliative Care Australia, they're doing great things with promoting, advanced care planning, and, there's so much more options available for people. And it is getting talked about more, which is great. And I think, you mentioned it sort of sometimes people think it's a bit macabre, but as I jokingly say, in our training, just like you don't get pregnant from talking about it, you don't die from talking about it either.
Well, yeah. Well, certain societies treat it in very different ways, and I suppose you get that terrible image of the black hearse and everybody wearing black suits to the funeral, and it's all terribly sad. And yes, it is. But the two that I've been to recently for fellas in my business, they were both 70 odd, and it was more a celebration of what great blokes they were rather than sad. Of course there's sadness, but there was like a festival almost as well.
Yeah, look, I think that's very true. And these days, there are so many more options for people to actually celebrate life. And, now there's even quite a strong movement towards what we call home-based after-death care. So when a person has died, a lot of people don't realise that you can take care of your person at home, that you can have family-led funeral care. That, the days of, as you say, the blacks, and some people want that, and that's fine too. Yeah. But there are other options now, as you say, to celebrate life rather than, commiserate the death. And grief is a real thing, and there are often people hurting as well.
Yeah. Okay, let's explain it. What's an end-of-life doula?
Well, doula is a Greek word, and it basically translates to, a person of service. So we are a non-medical, non-clinical role that provides support, education, and resources to people at end of life, maybe advancing in age, maybe living with a diagnosis or approaching end of life, or those people supporting them. And support's got many faces. It can look like practical, physical support. It can look like resources. It can look like spiritual, mental, emotional support. As I said, non-clinical, non-medical. So we're working alongside the more, if you like, the more medical or nursing or allied health roles. But we're the people that can be there on the ground. There's some interesting stats that Professor Helen Callanan released, and he was talking about that only 5% of the time a person is advancing in age or, approaching end of life or grieving. Only 5% of the time are they in front of a doctor or a nurse. 95% of the time they're alone or at home or with family, friends. They're with their dog or the TV or the internet. So doulas work in that 95%. We're non-medical, non-clinical. So that's where they're, and we can spend more time there and be there and help them resource themselves and know what their choices are.
Yeah. So, Preparing the Way, and as I said, government accredited. What's in the what's in the course? What does it entail?
Well, so we're very excited because it's the world's first and only nationally accredited end-of-life doula training. It has been now, coming up to our third year. Basically the entire Certificate 4 is a 15-unit program, and 4 of those units are specifically designed by Preparing the Way and in collaboration with Natural Grace Holistic Funeral Directors. So they're about the actual practical hands-on skills of after-death care, how to support a person who's actively dying, what and who a doula is, and then funeral and bereavement support. But then the other 11 units are things about how do we, things like occupational health and safety, and so some basic, legal requirements that there are. Then also we're building relationships with health professionals. What if I want to do this as a business? How do I create a business plan? How do I advocate for people? So there's a number of different units that sort of come out of other community service packages, but we have contextualized them to the role of doula because, again, non-medical, non-clinical.
Yeah, and obviously different cultures have different ways of approaching, end of life. Do you cover that?
That's the truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do. We do talk about that. And what's wonderful is that we have, people come and do our training from different cultures, and we do some exploring of that. And that's what's such a great thing because as you say, each culture, each generation does things differently. So it's really about doula is about we talk about being able, having the ability to respond to what's in front of us and the needs. It's not about us pushing our barrow and our agenda, but rather listening to people. We talk about giving people back the 3 C's, choice, capacity, and control.
Yeah.
So we're telling them what their options are, not advising them what they should do, and then they choose, because you're the expert in your life. You know what's meaningful to you. And so my job would be to let you know what all of your options are and then support you to fulfill those as you choose and your family choose.
Of course. Listeners, have you got a question for Helen? I'm sure you wouldn't mind answering it too, would you, Helen?
No, not at all.
About engaging a doula. Do you have a plan? Would you engage an end-of-life doula? Know someone's done it? Got a question for Helen about what it does. So get in touch by all means. 1300 222 702, as you know, is the phone number, or 0467 922 702. Do you find, Helen, and it's, my experience, the older people get, the more they tend to embrace this whole idea of preparing the way. And do you think people are a little bit more vocal about it now than they used to be? It used to be sort of like, well, let's not talk about that because we don't really want to upset anyone. Yeah.
Yeah, look, I think I'll address the second bit first. So, yes, people are talking about it more. I think that these days people really do want to know their options. There is more, talk about it. And, in the past we've lived like it's life versus death. The death is to be something to be avoided. And if you think about the billion-dollar anti-aging industry.
That's right,
yeah. And so now, but if you think about it, death's not the opposite of life. Death's the opposite of birth, and both birth and death are part of a full life. So it is getting talked about now. People are focusing more on life and quality of life now. That's getting much more airplay, and choice is getting much more airplay. So it really is starting to be talked about a lot more. And I think our older generations, in my experience, because if you think about the swell of the baby boomers right now, right, and I'm one of them, my hands up.
Yeah.
The numbers are extraordinary. The number of people needing palliative care and approaching over 65 is going to double by 2030 and again by 2050.
Yeah.
Those are remarkable stats. So all of those people that are listening that are younger than, a baby boomer, we're going to become their problem.
Yeah.
And death has to go back into our homes now, like it did previously. And, I'm really excited to say that end-of-life doulas are really helping people be able to navigate end-of-life, whether they're just planning for it or they have elderly parents, we can help them plan, or whether they're living with an illness, palliative care, whatever stage they're in. We work inside a 10-stage model and we provide that authentic continuity of care. We can actually be there alongside a person or a family along the entire journey that they're on. Yeah.
Yeah. Helen, just stay with me for a few seconds. And
of course.
And Tony, you stay there too. Anybody else, if you've got a question about this, 1300 222 702, give us a call, as Tony has. We're back in a tick. Yes, we're speaking with Helen Callanan from Preparing the Way, preparing for your departure. And Tony's on the line. G'day, Tony.
G'day, Tim. How's it going?
Good. What have you got?
I've decided well before my, impending death, whenever that's going to be, to record my funeral.
Oh.
That's from the greeting through the through the songs, through everything, right up until see you later.
Yeah, but how are you going to do that if you're not here?
I'm going to record it as in the next couple of weeks.
Okay.
It's going to go onto a memory stick and
I see.
When the time comes, all my family have to do at the funeral, give the memory stick to the funeral director and say, right, press the button.
Yeah, right. And you make a very good point because you never know when you're going to, pop off, do you?
No. And also it's just like I've had to organise a funeral or two and do the eulogies, and there's nothing worse than having to do all of this while you're under the stress of someone dying.
No, that's true.
There's something different.
Yeah, that's true, Tony. I've had to speak, not had to, I wanted to, at a couple recently, and it's tough, and you can't really help but be emotional because you've lost somebody that you had a great deal of respect and love for. But, if it's all laid out, then no one can argue, can they?
No, well, that's it.
Yeah.
And if someone wants to say something, they've got to try and disprove me.
Yes. By the way, what song have you chosen to go out with? It must be one.
I've chosen two. The first one's "So Long Farewell" from The Sound of Music.
Yeah, right.
And the final one is "Don't Change" by INXS.
Oh, yeah, great song. I'm going to use "Long Run" by the Eagles.
Oh, yeah.
Who's going to make it? We'll find out, Tony, in the long run. That's a great call. Thanks, Tony. Yeah.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Bye.
Helen, that's a good approach, yeah?
Yeah, it is a great approach. And I think, when I'm doing an advanced care plan or I'm doing, sort of end-of-life planning with people, I have three sort of prongs to the approach. Because the first thing is what a lot of people, is some people will need care. They may not be imminently dying, but they'll need care. And, many of us go into aged care or we've got things going on. So, I want to talk to people about, well, what if you needed care? Where do you want to be cared for? What do you like? What would be important to you to have? Who do you want there? Who don't you want there? Then there's medical planning, like what if there was an emergency and you found yourself in ED, you'd had a heart attack or something. What's okay for you? What is your, what's okay for you? What's tolerable for you as a style of life? But then there's also, as Tony just talked about, well, then what would you like after your death, or where would you want to be cared for and how? And I just worked with a family recently whose 6.5-year-old son died at home. And it was totally on their terms that their little boy died at home with them there. He did not leave their home. They took care of him at home with the support of a doula. They took care of his body at home for 3 days. They arranged his burial. They took him locally to his burial. And they, family and friends actually filled in the grave themselves. And this was with the support of Natural Grace Holistic Funerals in Victoria.
Okay.
And so, but all of this was well planned out a long time ahead so that when the final thing happened, as Tony said, they could be in their grief and feeling that, but they had a plan. They weren't then scrambling around trying to go, oh my God, under this enormous emotional, pressure to then try and make all those choices. They'd done that work. And boy, it made a difference. They were able to stand tall in their grief and have this go the way they wanted that was so important to them.
Okay. Lisa's got a question for you. People are living with chronic diseases at higher and younger rates. That's true. Not all looking at palliative care, but quality of life care. Can doulas work in that space? Can you do the capacity to do that?
Yeah, 100%. So we work with people basically, really doulaing is about supporting people in a time of transition. So it might be that someone is in rehab post maybe a big surgery and they're trying to get their life back on track. Maybe they are living with a life-limiting illness or just a long-term chronic illness, as your listener said. We absolutely work there. Then we work with people also as they're approaching end of life and after death as well. So all the way through that spectrum, yes, 100%.
Okay, great. Here's Tom. Hi, Tom.
Good afternoon, Tim and Helen.
Hi.
I work Good afternoon. I'm a volunteer since I've retired in the funeral ministry, but through a church organisation. Now, we sit with the family and put together the booklets and set the funeral up, sort of thing. So is doula service sort of thing, is there anywhere we can join do the course?
100%, because really, like, in a sense, sorry, was your name Tony? I'm sorry, I missed it.
Tom. It's Tom.
Tom, I beg your pardon, Tom. I mean, it was a T. So beg your pardon, Tom. So absolutely, like, in a sense, you're already doulaing, you're providing that support, and you're being there and you're helping people. So any of the training would be around supporting you, just deepening. You know, we do a lot of work around what we call holding space, or being the capacity to listen, the capacity to be with, and there's nothing to fix, but just to support. So I think any of those skill sets would be just expanding what you're already doing. Absolutely. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well, we do the pastoral care, clinical pastoral care sort of thing,
yes,
like as a chaplaincy sort of thing. But so how do you just go online and Google doula sort of thing, do you?
Yeah, so if you our website is www.preparingtheway.com.au, and you'll notice on there's end of life doula training, so you can go on there and send us an email. And we can give you all of our details, and we have a free webinar that you can come on to hear all about it and see if we're the one that matches for you.
Yeah.
Okay,
all right, Tom.
Thanks
Good on
very
you,
much
Tom.
for your help.
Yeah, good question. Does spirituality fit into the end of life doula?
Oh, honestly, so much, Tim,
Great.
so much. Because, look, even though people, some people have lived, if you like, non-religiously, non-faith-based all of their life, but that doesn't mean that end of life doesn't bring with it quite a deeply spiritual awakening or context to it. It's not necessarily. Some people are deeply religious, and that carries through, or they're faith-based. Other people are just, not particularly aligned anywhere. But at end of life, there's often really profound things that can occur for families, for people. It's a time of really reckoning, of confronting what this next part of our journey is and how we approach that. Yeah. Are we going into it eyes open, heart open, or are we going into it fearful and afraid because of ignorance? So educating people around that and exploring that with people. It's not about me telling people what I believe. It's more about, well, let's explore what's important to you. What do you believe? And what have you heard about? What would you like to explore? Yeah. And then exploring that so people can really dig for themselves and find their own truth, what that is for them.
It's very informative talking to you. Kate says this to us. Funerals aren't for the person who's died, for those left to express their thankfulness, their sorrow, their love. So pre-recording a funeral is not something I would do, says Kate. I feel like it takes away from the necessity to express grief and memories. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, look, I think it's one of those things that, as with everything in the world that we work in as doulas, is everything is individual choice. For some people, it's imperative that they have a voice after their death and that they do that. Because here's the other thing I see, is that there are times that families, I see the devastation and the difficulty that can be created for families when people have not expressed anything of their wish of what they want to happen. One woman I worked with many years ago now, her husband died suddenly, unexpectedly, 44 years of age, 3 young sons. And to this day, as far as I know, she's still agonizing, did I choose the right thing, burial over cremation? Yeah. Because that was a conversation they hadn't had. So whilst it's not being prescriptive, I agree with that. That for some people, they love that they can give this final gift to their person who's died to take care of them in the way they wanted to be taken care of, and feeling like I've been able to give this last gift. We did a really great job, and because it's the last gift they'll never be able to say thank you for. Yeah. So for some people, that's important. For others, they want to plan it, and some people say, I don't mind, I'll be dead, you work it out. And that's okay too. So yeah, that's okay. It really is so individual, Tim. Yeah, it's so individual.
Gee, and this is a lovely text from Alex in Terrigal. And Alex, I have to say, I'm on the same wavelength with this. Death is harder without faith in a better afterlife. I find that anyway. The finality is very hard to comprehend on what we're told is an infinite universe. Great segment. And what do you want played at your funeral? And she's thinking about something from Huddersfield Collectors. That infinite universe thing is something that's always been in my head. I mean, I just can't accept there's a total finality. I can't, but that's just me.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I understand that. And where I reference, I mean, I was raised in the bush and in the country, and I remember there being a big fire through a big set of trees. And there was all of this burnt trees, and I loved the trees in the bush, and they were my friends because I was, we were very remote. And I talked to them and hung out with them as a child. And this time I went home and there was all of this burnt forest. And then I went back 3 or 4 months later when I came home from boarding school for my next school holidays, and all of a sudden there was this growth, a new growth. And I remember sitting down and crying and just being like, oh, my God, they weren't dead. There's something more. I look to nature.
Yeah.
That's where I take my thing from, and I think there is a consistency. I personally, I have very strong beliefs that there's more after. I'm sorry.
All right.
Do you want me to stop?
Yeah, because I run out of time, but I couldn't agree with you more.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That whole idea that, if that's it, I just find that hard to accept, and listeners do too.
Yes.
Gee, Helen, it's been lovely to talk to you. Helen's from Preparing the Way, and by the way, a latest podcast episode of ABC Newcastle with Loris Dixon. You can hear it as well. It's been great to talk to you, Helen. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And Natural Grace is opening in Newcastle, so go people.
Helen Callanan from Preparing the Way.
ABC Radio Sydney with Tim Webster.